Welcome to HousingWire Daily. I'm Clayton Collins, CEO at HousingWire and the host of the Powerhouse podcast. But today I get to stand in and host HousingWire Daily with our esteemed guest, Mr. Logan Mohtashami. In this episode, we talk about recent data reports that dropped this week, including CPI and purchase and refi apps. We talk about what this means for real estate and mortgage professionals. And we also talk about some of the events that are coming up in the second half of 2024, where Logan will be speaking, or I'll be speaking, or HousingWire will be attending, some stuff that we think you'll find interesting. Hope you enjoyed today's episode of HousingWire Daily. Logan, welcome.
It's wonderful to be here.
So, Logan, I've been busy the last week listening and reading about a lot of the mortgage bank and real estate tech earnings calls. It's earnings season, right? So in the last week, we've seen Guild report results where they reported that origination volume jumped 69% compared to Q2 prior year. UWM had a strong quarter and said they are actively selling MSRs to prepare to invest more in technology and scaling. I had a podcast yesterday on Powerhouse with Randall Gillespie from Lower. Randall also reported their volume is up big in Q3. So excited to hear those numbers when this quarter is fully baked. And the CEOs of Blend and Redfin, both an interesting earnings calls. Redfin especially talked about their optimism for housing. And, you don't ever love to hear that people are betting on rates, but both of those CEOs did express that they expect the rate environment to improve, translating to more volume, translating to better business performance for their companies. So we're seeing optimism.
Didn't the Redfin CEO say something about drinking blood or something else?
Well, actually, I think he talked more specifically about drinking urine, but yes, a bodily fluid.
Okay. Interesting choice, but hey. It's the world we live in.
I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said that if the business environment does not improve, his team is prepared to go back to the bunkers and drink their urine to survive, which I think was we debated that a lot internally. I was actually personally of the viewpoint that we should have put that in the headline of the article. I think that would have drawn a lot of attention. And I think that's what Glenn Kelman meant to do, is draw attention. But basically is what he was saying is hey, we are survivors. I don't care what the market delivers. Obviously, I would like a better environment than a worse environment. But if it sucks, if it's bad, we will survive, I think is the message he was sending.
Sounds like, an airplane crashing in the Arctic with about 10 people and, they're the survivors at this point, they're still around. So it is interesting because, when I talk about existing home sales, and I never shy away from this statement, it has been the third calendar year of the lowest home sales ever when you adjust it to the workforce. But it's no longer crashing, right? We're not falling noticeably, or we're not growing noticeably. And the one variable that changes all of this is rates. Whenever rates fall, demand picks up. We saw that at the end of 2022. We saw that at the end of 2023. And we're seeing that currently. It's nothing big. But one of the things I always like to highlight now, and this is going to be a main talking point going out for the next 18 months, is that we actually had worse affordability in the early 1980s. And in the 1980s, even with mortgage rates double digits, home prices actually didn't fall, even though there was more inventory back then. But the only thing that changed the variable of demand was mortgage rates falling and more households being created, especially with dual household income. So in this context, we have to look at housing in that way, because that's the only thing we can reference to, because the market was never driven by credit, where the mortgage availability index went from 100 to 900 down to 100 again. It was, pretty much 30-year fixes. So the only way affordability gets better on the national sense faster is mortgage rates falling. Of course, home prices are still at all-time highs. That makes the affordability issue even worse. But we have models for this. It just needs lower rates for longer, letting the data line kick in.
Yeah. But one of the big things that's different about now in the 80s, which I'll remind everybody, this is hard for me to say, but the 80s was 40 years ago. The information world has changed very quickly. And one of the things we have going on in today's market is faster information, social media, the tools that can create a vibe session. So how do you think the flow of information like changes the consumer mentality and consumer psychology around homeownership in a world where information flow is totally different. This 40-year gap from like 85 to 2024.
Well, the simplest and easiest answer is that everybody is more informed about where rates are.
Yes.
I mean, I remember as a kid, my father's been in banking since the late 1950s, but it's been also something to where it's just not, you don't have to look in the newspaper or anything. You just look at your phone app.
You don't even have to look at your phone app. Like this morning, it was on the Today Show. There was a whole segment on interest rates and the NAR settlement and changes to commission splits. Like, it's a front and center topic on like daily talk TV for people who don't think about housing like you and I do all day, every day.
Information comes in faster, and then people can make choices faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things change. Now, what we have seen, like this is a really good example. At the end of 2022 and the end of 2023, rates have fallen 1%. Everybody sees that. Purchase application data that's close enough to the seasonal period of time where people started applying, they get it quicker and they apply quicker. So on a historical basis, you can make a case that informational technology being faster makes people make their choices faster. Like, we don't usually see growth in the data lines toward the end of the year. It's usually after the second week of January to the first week of May. However, the last two Novembers, as rates have fallen 1%, people were applying for loans because it takes about 30 to 90 days for, let's say, an application to a final sale. That's where information gets there, because the early bird, gets the worm. Right. So if people see rates falling and they're planning to buy a home anyway, right, they go in there and they fill out an application. That makes sense. And it's not going to hit the data lines very soon, but it starts the process faster. And that's something where the 1980s, even the 1990s and early 2000s, what wasn't the case as much. Now it's on our fingertips. Everything's on our fingertips now these days. So you become more productive, more efficient in the process of buying a house. And that's also changed. I used to always joke. I remember we used to have something called a fax machine and a transbox. And these things actually, it takes time to close a transaction. Now you could close purchase in 8 to 11 business days. So things just move faster than what it used to be. And I think people are just more informed if they're home buyers, right? If they're planning to buy a house, they're more averse to what the data is doing out there.
I know how you feel about like when someone is prepared to buy a house, but like, let's talk about the well-prepared, financially ready, sidelined first-time home buyer. Does the early bird actually get the worm right now? Should that person be moving fast? Are there market dynamics that like might make now better than later?
So I would say this, 90% plus of first-time home buyers finance their purchases. So whenever we see mortgage demand grow, it's usually they're the big players into it. Millennials have been the biggest home buyers for many, many years. The only time they lost that title recently is when rates got up to 7-8%, and now they're back again. They're just so massive as a generation. So in this context, they're there. And these are millennials. These aren't people looking at newspapers or anything like that. Boy, they got on the apps and, oh my God, look, rates fell, So when they're ready, they're already in the process. They just get the information and they jump on it. And that's what the data has shown. The data has shown the people that are ready and already in the process of thinking, okay, I'm going to buy. When they see rates fall, we see that in the data. Usually it's very seasonal. It usually just happens kind of like from January to May. But Novembers, the last two Novembers in 2022 and 2023, rates fell 1%. And guess what? Purchase application data did grow. So the kids are a little bit faster than their parents and grandparents, I would tell you.
What does it say about me that I'm the millennial who still gets the Wall Street Journal tossed in my front yard every morning?
You know what? Some people like nostalgia. It is what it is.
I think by the time our newspaper delivery guy drops off the Wall Street Journal, you had already been on a CNBC interview. Like before it, like the paper hit my wet lawn, you were already on TV.
Yeah, and it's just like, for example, one of the things I do daily is on Instagram stories. I provide live, almost TV, of videos about talking about economics. We never used to have these things before, right? You'd have to you watch a business channel for something like that. The access to information is so vast. Now, a lot of the information is bad. I mean, we've always said we kind of make fun of the housing bubble crash people for 12, 13 years now. But if you're looking for real-time information data, things that actually matter, it's there for you.
All right, Logan, let's give our audience, HousingWire Daily audience, some good data, some good information. So this morning, we're recording this on Wednesday, folks. It's going to hit your podcast feed on Thursday. And we're actually recording this before we've even written these articles up. So you're getting the first cut here, but it's good. I promise. I've already got a preview from Logan. This morning, CPI inflation report dropped. Inline estimates, CPI under 3% in the headline number. Why does this matter? Give us the details.
Well, I would say that the rate cut is officially sealed and in. The growth rate of CPI inflation has been falling for. I mean, we're going to get the rate cut in September. If there was ever anything that could maybe pause this, if CPI exploded higher, the inflation story died 12, 18 months ago. But now the headline CPI report came in just a tad lower than estimates. It's 2.9% year over year. And a lot of the growth in the month-to-month data was shelter again, and it's lagging. We all know it's lagging. Growth rate of shelter real time is lower. Wage growth is slowing down. Supply is coming up. So the 10-year yield as of this second, as before I even got on the show, was about 3.81. This is a triple bottom area. This is a very key level. We break through this, and the spreads get better. We have sub 6% mortgage rates. And, what we've seen is that if rates stay lower for longer, we can grow sales. The problem we've always had is that whenever rates go lower, and then the Fed freaks out and goes, oh my God, how are we supposed to get the economy back in line, and rates go back up again. Now we're in a different stage. And that's the CPI inflation, just to give everyone some historical perspective. If I go back to 1914, the average CPI inflation headline is 3.3%. It's 2.9. So we don't have this breakaway inflation data anymore. It's literally mathematically impossible to have breakaway inflation without shelter inflation taking off. And shelter inflation came in 5.1%. That's the lowest since the recent peak in the data lines. So we're heading in the right direction. And again, we always say this, Sarah and I, we always have this thing for the last 2 years: paper, rock, scissors, labor over inflation. That's the key. The labor data getting softer pushes rates even lower from where we are, because the Fed is still very restrictive. Even after they cut rates, they are so far from a neutral Fed policy that if the labor data breaks on them, they have to start picking up on their rate cuts and doing more. And this is the problem with them waiting so long, that now that the unemployment rate goes up, if the housing market on the construction labor sides breaks, you're going to have over 5% unemployment rates with jobless claims breaking. Then that forces them to be a little bit more aggressive than they probably would rather be. But this is the problem with waiting so long until you see visually, oh, we're losing jobs now. Now we have, so it is what it is. But the inflation report is good enough that even some of the more hawkish Fed members would have to say, okay, the September rate cut is here.
Logan, what is a neutral Fed position? What does that look like?
It's really debatable on what people have talked about, but I would argue that the Fed funds rate, 3.25%, 3.5%, you can make a case for neutral policy where you're not being too restrictive or too accommodative with where inflation's at. That you need 8 rate cuts, really. Yep. You get 8 rate cuts, you start to get into that neutral policy. That means that the labor market and the economy is still progressing forward. My contention with the Fed is that they're letting the labor data get weaker on them, that if now that the unemployment rate is at 4.3%, more people are looking for work. They're still looking for work. If they lose the housing sector, and the reason I bring this up, every single recession post-World War II, housing breaks first. Residential construction loses their job, unemployment claims rise. They need housing kind of back to prevent that from happening, because they waited too long So you're playing a game that I wouldn't have done. But this is where the 10-year yield matters more to everyone listening to this, real estate or mortgage. It's not so much of the Fed rate cuts. The bond market will always get ahead of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, by its nature, is old and slow. It's not an institution that can move fast, but the bond market can. So thankfully, the bond market did what it usually does. It tries to get ahead of the Federal Reserve. Now in 2022 and 2023, I would argue that it tried to get ahead of that too much, but now it has merit. And this time it can stick, right? It can stick lower, and then everybody could, the country can move on without worrying about let's being too tight a policy. But you're not going to get neutral policy from the Fed anytime soon, unless they're doing 0.5% cuts every time in the next 4 or 5 meetings. So the economic data matters more now than ever. And if the labor market starts to break on them even harder, the 10-year yield goes lower. If the spreads get better, you're going to get low 5% mortgage rates and possibly even under 5% in that scenario. But we're not there yet. We're going to focus on all the economic data like we always do, but we always make sure to let everyone know labor data runs the show. It has run the show for the last few months. If the labor data wasn't getting softer, the 10-year yield wouldn't have gone down. The growth rate of inflation has fallen a lot already. So we just focus on that labor side of the equation because that matters to everybody in housing more.
Logan, one of the talking points that I've heard directly from mortgage leaders, and I've heard in some of the earnings calls, when the topic of Fed movement comes up and rates coming down, there's a knee jerk or organic response to that. But like, yes, that'll be positive for interest rates, but we're still keeping a very close eye on margin. So lenders are basically saying, yes, rate environment has a possibility to get better, but we need to make some money. How do you interpret that, like that talking point? Because I feel like is salient and it is going to matter as we start to project out interest rates into this anticipated Fed activity.
One side, the cost of doing business is something that can't get cured by the bond market. I could tell you that the one thing that can get better for everyone in the mortgage industry is that the spreads do get better. Now, historically, the spreads between the 30-year and the 10-year yield have been really bad for a long time, but they've improved this year. I mean, we would be like 50 to 60 basis points higher in rates today if the spreads didn't improve year over year. It's something we make sure everybody realizes on the weekly tracker reports. But if the spreads get better and the 10-year yield falls, that's in that environment, that's the best thing that could maybe help margins, because you're not really going to get it from the cost side. The cost side is just, there's such embedded cost into doing mortgage right now. But on the mortgage and the spread side, it could give a little bit more wiggle room to make more money. And to me, that's the best case scenario, is falling yields and better spreads makes a better environment for everyone. What you don't want to see is, we have a negative reaction to economic data or some kind of banking stress happens and the spreads get worse. That's what you don't want to see. So this is why I always say the Fed does not need to play with fire anymore. It needs to just turn and just do what it can to just push the economic expansion higher. And housing is the key for them, like I've shown in every single economic cycle. So better spreads, 10-year yield going, that's the best you can hope for, because I don't see any real improvement on the cost side of the equation.
Interesting. Okay, so good inflation report. How is that translating to application volume for purchase and refi?
So this becomes an interesting topic in the sense that a lot of people have been disappointed with the lower rate move, but again, there's always the seasonality of housing. Like, people just don't go, oh, we just got back from our vacation in August. Oh, rates are down. Let's go buy a house, right? There's
Speak
always
yourself. I'm ready to go. Realtors, lenders, call me. I'm ready to rock.
There's always I always stress this, that the second week of January to the first week of May is where you get the seasonal. It's housing is all seasonal. I mean, all the data lines have the same curve, the front loaded, and then so We are actually at the last 10 weeks, we've had 6 positive prints and 4 negative. That's actually the best 10 weeks of the year. Refinances are up a lot. And of course, when you're working from the lowest levels ever, right, you're going to get these really big percentage. We always make fun of the people that say foreclosures are up 700%. Well, refinance application is up over 100% plus. But that's working from a very low bar. To get a little bit a better range is the closer we get to the seasonality of housing. And if rates keep on falling, that's, I think, where the meat and bones would have to be. Now, the last 2 Novembers have been close enough toward that seasonal area to where when rates fall, you get a little bit more volume. But as crazy as this sounds, the last 10 weeks have been positive. I think there's a difficulty in some people tracking purchase application data. I've seen this, for over 12 years, and the week to week is positive. And I say this because the pending home sales report, the last one, came in as like a big beat, and people were anticipating a huge decline in that data line. But the first kind of 3 weeks of June were 3 straight weeks of positive data. It doesn't take much to move the needle here. So when we think about this, this is part of the tracker article too, 30 to 90 days out. If you have a positive trend, whether it's big or small, it's still a positive trend. It's nothing spectacular. Like when housing demand comes back, we're going to have positive year over year data, and the week to week prints are going to be good. We're still, showing negative year over year data. We're going to get some positive prints soon because of the comps when 8% mortgage rate.
So we're negative year over year on purchase right now.
Yeah. And
that's interesting. So like the Guild report, I thought it was interesting that they in Q2 chose to report on over. Actually, no, this is quarter over quarter. Guild reported they were up 69% Q2 over Q1. I did not go back and look at how they did Q2 over Q2. So that'd be an interesting measure.
Yeah,
how individual lenders are performing against like market.
We haven't had positive year over year data in many years. Actually, it's been a low, and people have to realize the MBA's purchase application data is a trend survey, right? I mean, we're going to most likely have probably a little bit higher home sales this year than last year, but it's a trend survey, so it's not an exact science. It gives you kind of a directional trend. And when you're like low single digits growths or low single digit declines, not much is happening really, but it gives you kind of a trend. Now, when you have real demand, like the COVID-19 recovery model, when we were collapsing and everything, and we said, hey, listen, by May 18th, we're going to get some positive. But we had such a V-shaped recovery in purchase application because demand was there. Rates were low. All people had to do is think, okay, we're going to be alive. We're going to have to keep on living. And it just shot right back up. When you see real demand growth, it'll be so obvious in the data in terms of the year over year is going to be positive, and we'll see the headline volumes grow. We're just not there. The thing is that we're not crashing either. And I think that's the thing, is that so much of my work over the last 10 years plus is like explaining to people, we really don't like go below 4 million home sales after 1996. Like we don't have a total existing home sales print under 4 million. We didn't have it last year. Most likely it's not going to be this year. So it doesn't take much to move the needle. But just like the early 1980s, mortgage rates had to dip a couple percent and stay there. It can't just shoot right back up. And I think that's the thing, is that when you get lower rates for longer, the pool, the gradual pool of more people getting ready to buy picks up. And when you're working from the lowest levels ever, it doesn't take much to move that. But we're not quite there yet, but we're not crashing in sales anymore like we did in 2022.
Awesome. Okay, Logan, awesome data. Thanks for bringing some truth to the market. Let's take a quick minute and talk about where folks in the audience can kind of see and hear you and HousingWire over the next few months. I was just like kind of tallying up all the events that we're getting ready for right now.
We're going everywhere. I mean, we are, we have our cocktails event in Orange County in August 21st.
That's next. That's a week from today, or next Wednesday, August 21st. This is Real Trends Verified leadership reception for real estate agents and brokers in Orange County.
And we're going to have another one in Phoenix a month from now. We're going to New Hampshire to speak to the State Association of Realtors. we already have so many already packed in for 2025 too. Idaho, North Carolina is asking, Chicago. So we have a lot of cities and things to tour. And I tell you, the Nerd Tour Logan Live is so much fun, so much better than behind the camera.
Himself.
And that's the thing. I think the way I try to present economic data or talk about it is try to make it as fun as possible from a subject that really, if you do it right, is not supposed to be fun. But I tend to see like a lot of my economic friends don't try to make it fun, and I try to make it as entertaining. But my job is to make it so easy. Like the charts that we make are designed to be so easy to understand that all of you can talk to your clients about it. But the live events are just much different, right?
We'll throw a few more events out there. So we're not speaking at this one, but I will be attending. A few other folks from HousingWire will be at Renee Rodriguez's AmpCon this Friday, August 16th here in Dallas. Next week, Logan mentioned the Orange County Real Trends Verified Real Estate Leadership Reception out in Orange County. So hit Logan up if you want to attend that. Day after that, I'm interviewing Leo Pareja in Orlando at the NAMBA conference. So if you're going to be at NAMBA, come check out my session with Leo. We had a few more events in September. October 1st, we have the HousingWire IMB Summit here in Dallas, Texas. And in February, we're doing another economic summit, the Housing Economic Summit in February. We're going to talk about forecasts for 2025. I know Logan will be taking the stage at that one. So we'll keep you updated on events. But if any of those pique your interest, drop Logan or I a note or visit housingwire.com and check them out. Logan, thank you for being an expert. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being prolific and bringing information to housing professionals across the globe, which you always point out to me that we have like these like pockets of fans in like Taiwan and Belgium and other places.
Oh yeah, we even had a Finland bank ask us to speak in front of for their clientele. So yeah, we're global.
All right, everyone, have a great week. Drive some purchase volume for us all. We love reporting on good numbers. Peace.